What's up, guys, and welcome to the A2B1 Podcast with our segment Anime Fight of the Week, where we have an in-depth discussion of various anime and manga series, where you get to hear our thoughts, opinions, and any arguments that may ensue between us. Regardless of who you agree with, we can assure you it'll be an entertaining ride. Joining me today is my co-host, Aaron. Aaron, why don't you introduce yourself?
I'm Aaron, a.k.a. Aaron. This is a podcast I thought of, just in my sleep, and it just kind of exploded from there. You know, I just thought that we have a lot of discussions, and here's my other co-host, Axl.
Hey guys, this is Axl. I'm just really excited to be here, and I'm going to introduce the person who started it all off, our local Joestar, Brandon Joseph Joestar.
What's up, guys? So yes, my name is Brandon Joseph Joestar, and yes, that is my real name. And with the A2B1 Podcast, we keep our conversations both amusing and bizarre, just like our topic for today, Jojo's Bizarre Adventure, specifically parts 1 and 2 of the series. So I think what we're going to do is start off talking about some of our favorite moments and some of our favorite or reasons that we enjoy this series. So Aaron, why don't you start us off?
Well, to start off with, the aesthetics of the anime is just really well done. Like the art, how it kind of feels like a more creepy horror movie than anything else. I feel like you can agree with me on that.
100%.
The art style is really well done. I especially like the color scheme they use with the moments and the zooming in on faces and stuff, how they do the shadowing and the art and everything. It just feels like a very good anime.
Yeah, part 1 specifically, as far as the horror-esque goes. Part 2 still kind of has that feel to it with the Pillar Men, and you kind of still have that zombie vampiric vibe, but part 1 is definitely the darkest. It's got the most gothic horror theme to it.
100%. 100%.
It definitely feels like, your old school monster movies, Dracula, Frankenstein, it gives off that kind of vibe.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things about part 1 and 2 of the series, as far as our group goes, this podcast, is we have a bit of a hot take. So part 1 and 2 is actually the favorite series among everyone that's here, and while that may be controversial in the JoJo community, let us defend ourselves. So first off, I think all of us also prefer the dubbed. Is that correct?
Oh, yes.
Okay,
I think the dub is just really well done with the accents and just like I said, how it's just all done. I think it's one of the best dubs I've seen in a long time.
It's got a great cast. The accents are on point for the time period. It just does a great job of getting you in the atmosphere.
Yeah, and that's exactly what sold it for me. Now, obviously, there's nothing wrong with the sub. Dio's voice actor is just phenomenal. He's always been iconic throughout the entire series. Though I do love his English voice actor, too. He's the same guy who played Gamagori in Kill la Kill. He's got such a powerful, threatening-like voice. And as they said, just getting with the times, the sort of linguistics that they use, especially in the dub, whenever they say things like, I understand you boys are prone to fisticuffs, and it's just everything feels so authentic to the time period, and I think that's a huge selling point. And Jonathan, as far as I go, has just always been my favorite JoJo. I know that he gets flack for kind of being the Mary Sue that he is, but of course I'm a Superman fan. That's my favorite comic book character, so he resembles that, just an all-around good who has to somewhat internalize his struggle with the sheer power that he holds and his willingness to just keep by and do righteousness with his wealthy family and the power that he obtains through there, and to be able to still fight through the bitter end for the the side of good. That's what I like about him.
I will say one big thing about him is he came from a well-off family, but that well-off family doesn't really act like a well-off family. They're more about helping other people than they are about themselves, and I really like that aspect. That makes him a very high up on the list, but at the same time, it's just I can't get past the whole white knight stuff.
Yeah, I mean, unless Jonathan's manners are bad at the table, then his dad smacks him with a spoon.
But it also makes the manners things also make sense for the time period of when he grew up, and like I said, being a well-off family. So I mean, it makes sense. I'm just saying he's high on my list, but at the same time lower on my list as far as especially with 1 and 2.
He's also not my favorite, but that's more because I don't really like that he's so cut and dry. He's just it feels like from beginning to end he's pretty much the same character, and that's fine. And it works for the story, but when I'm looking for a character, he can't be my favorite Joestar with being so bland, as you'd say.
He has one defining moment where he changes. He has one moment where he's oh, I guess I need to evolve a little bit. That's about it.
See, my bias for part 1 specifically, not even just Jonathan as a character, is I love that he is really the only JoJo. You just get a timeline of his whole life, basically from his childhood to his death. You get the first 3 episodes, which are pretty much my 3 favorite of the series. They quite literally could be a movie, especially because the 3rd episode ends with, the assumed death of Dio before finding out, oh, spoiler alert, he's not actually dead. And I think that really does it for me, is you get to see his struggles with Dio as a child, and then throughout their high school career, they have their struggles as well, where they're both, keeping peace with each other and still internalizing their dislike for each other. And then whenever they get past that, which is shortly after, Jonathan starts seeing the sickness with his with his father, start having a bit of a suspicion towards Dio, and then that's when he kind of delves into that, and then of course how the series ends. So
well, I will say, like, with Dio, like, you love to hate him within the first few episodes. Like, that's the one thing I put Dio really high on like my villains list, and we're not talking about villains list today. But he's very high up there as far as villains go, because, like I said, in the first few episodes, you see him, like, just overall, like, kick his dog and do all this stuff, and, like, he even murders the dog. I mean, you just love to hate Dio.
Now, just to get back to Jonathan just for a real quick second, I love, like, one of the things I really like about Jonathan is his relationship with Dio. Like, their dichotomy, I think is the right word. Like, is just perfect. Like, it's great. Their relationship throughout the series is just great. And that even helps play up Dio as, like, just such an amazing villain. Literally, the first episode, you immediately hate him. And you love to hate him, and it's just...
No, I agree with you on that.
He's phenomenal of a villain. The yin and yang between the two really is something. And that's, again, what really draws me. I know that a lot of people feel like part 1 takes off a little slower, and it just doesn't have the same feel as others, but considering the time period that it's based in, and not only the time period it's based in, but just the time period it was written in. Araki's been writing this manga for decades, and people a lot of times overlook at how ahead of its time something like JoJo's Bizarre Adventure was, with the amazing art style, the color palette swaps, and everything that just utilized so many great artistic and as far as the writing goes, just different things that really entrap the, I would like to think entrap the viewer. But I know not everyone gets past part 1 and is happy about it. Usually, people find comfort in later parts, and it tends to make them appreciate the previous parts. But part 1's really what hooked me, and I know that the two here can say the same. And, of course, we're fans of the Ripple. Haman is definitely something that is missed. And even in part 3, that's one of the most satisfying parts of it, is when Joseph wraps himself in the Hermit Purple with the Haman, and Dio senses it. It just, that callback to the first 2 parts is just a touch of genius.
I'm not going to touch part 3 today. Like, that's going to be that's
next week's video.
That's going to be a whole nother thing we're going to have to discuss, because I don't like part 3.
Okay, yeah. So we got hot takes here. Again.
Like, I'm just going to say that
next
right
week.
now.
He doesn't speak for everyone. Go ahead and get that twisted. We don't want people, God, they hate part 3 and love part 1 and 2. No, one of us does. But
going back to the whole anime and the part 1 and part 2, like it. And if you go back and look at how many people overlooked like part 1 and part 2 for so many years before it, like, people's like, oh, this is a really good anime. Like, it took a few years. Like, I think my friend Axl can illuminate a little bit more on that.
It took until I think part 3 for it to start getting more and more popularity. Like, and then part 4 kind of solidified it.
Yeah, part 3 definitely was.
So it's one of those animes that took a little while to catch people, but it is just an amazing.
Because the anime came out in like 2012, I believe, is when the anime for part 1 and part 2 came out, and I don't remember seeing a whole lot of JoJo fans coming up and it's like, oh, watch JoJo until 2016, 2015.
Yeah,
really?
It took some time.
I mean, it literally took me like almost 3 years to get my friends to watch it, and then
that's true.
And then they just all got obsessed with it all at once. Like,
yeah, I mean, you've got the OVA series that technically came out, but we don't much talk about that. It's got its own charm to it. But yeah, whenever I look at past things of like anime conventions from the 90s, you'll see people in JoJo cosplay, specifically, of course, part 3, because that's where the OVAs came, and that, as Axl said, really solidified, I think, a lot of people from back in the day as JoJo fans of the manga. And then when David Productions took over and did a phenomenal job animating this series, it took some time, but I think it really started to hammer people whenever they got to the animation of Part 3. And I'm just glad to see that it's really blossomed the way it has. And truthfully, I'm thankful that it's been hammered in my head to watch it, because as y'all heard from the beginning, my name is now Brandon Joseph Joestar, and as you can assume, it was inspired through it. It's easily become my absolute favorite anime series. It's phenomenal. Every aspect of it is just so high tier above everything else. And it's insane to me because I grew up on anime. You know, I was watching anime when I was just a child. My uncle got me into things like Ranma 1/2 and Tinky Muyo and all of those different things.
Tenchi
Muyo, my bad.
Oh, God.
Hot dog. Gotta
Literally,
break your
my
heart
first
for a
anime
minute.
was like Sailor Moon. Like,
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
a lot of people check me because of that, but, you know, it's what I started with. Good old Toonami.
No, mine was Inuyasha on the old Adult Swim.
See,
But
and that's what gets a lot of people into it is Toonami and adults, which I'm thankful that it brought it. But you know, and Ranma 1/2 was another big love of mine, and not Fushigi Yugi's, and just anything older like that. I mean, I have VHS anime, and that's really where it all started. And so to have such a library of anime and such decades spanning love for just animated fucking cartoons is something
I mean, they're
that
Japanese cartoons.
I mean,
so.
they are considered Japanese cartoons.
that's fair,
right?
but to have such a love for them for such a long time, and to see something just a couple years ago and for it to completely overtake my life as far as my fandom goes, speaks to me volumes for how just good the series is and how ahead of its time every aspect.
So
That's why we
let's
started this.
talk about a few of the aspects that we really like about JoJo's Part 1 and 2. Like, first of all, animation. Like, came out in 2012. It's got brilliant animation. Holds up today immensely well.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
100%.
great.
Like, I would compare. I could compare it to a lot of the newer ones and still think that JoJo's just like almost beats a lot of the newer ones as far as like animation goes and tying you up. Like, it's really well done.
Yeah, I think that a lot of the things that JoJo does well are just, well, of course, in today's climate, JoJo survives really well just because of the pure meme culture of it. The fact that it is so easily able to be memed and just teased upon, and everyone can make jokes about it. The fan base is,
the fan base is exploding.
every bit of that makes it easy to get into it. But again, like, just the sheer diversity that you see in the series, and a lot of the just differences that come up, like the things that people have to overcome. I think that's what does it for me and for a lot of people, is when you have a series like Dragon Ball Z, where you have a main protagonist who's just absurdly strong, and the whole thing is about him getting stronger and overcoming things. No hate to DBZ, because it's one of our favorites here as a collective as well, but you see something like that, and in JoJo's Bizarre Adventure you just see characters who seem like they're at their wits end about what to do against these overpowering threats, other than Jotaro's kind of got his own busted one, but against these other villains, you see Dio with his vampiric strength in Part 1, who is just absurd. You've got Cars, who becomes the ultimate life form, and you've got just these normal humans who, I wouldn't say normal, these abnormal humans who have their Haman.
They are ripped.
Yeah, that have to overcome these obstacles, and just the creative ways that they do things. Jonathan's punch into the flame to overpower, Dio's ice abilities is just a stroke of genius. And just to have that in writing, to know that when you're writing a character, you're not writing him as stronger than everyone else and how he defeats everyone else. You're writing him in a way that he is definitely not currently a match for these other people, and he has to figure out how he can become that.
I will say I really liked how he writ Dio to use a lot of his how he was so obsessed with learning about his body and his powers and just what he could do with his vampiric strength. I really liked that a lot. That's why I like Dio a lot. He's power hungry, but at the same time he's trying to be the best he can be. And I really like that aspect of Dio. The laser beams out of his eyes, that was a really
the ice power that fucking just destroyed Haman.
Yeah, there was no match for it.
He felt more like, honestly, after watching Part 2, he felt more like a Pillar Man, because he had the ice ability and the lasers. That's just something that, the Pillar Man, you'd think, would do. Like, he felt
Like-
more than just a normal vampire.
Like, he learned about his body, I feel like, really well.
He mastered his
He
body.
mastered his body. He mastered what he could do with what he had. I mean, he fought people as a head. Like, come on.
Exactly. That's the positive charm about Dios. He's so self-aware, and even though there are times where he can be cockier than what he is, a lot of time there's reason for it. You know, there's a reason. He's clearly above every other vampire in part 1, so why wouldn't he think he's just the absolute most powerful creature? And when he gets bested, that's when, you know, he shows his respect for Jonathan, and, you know, he claims how he doesn't want anyone to disrespect him because of the fact that Jonathan expressed such, you know, power in defeating
That
him.
was literally one of my favorite moments of part 1, was where he was just absolutely just showing his absolute respect for Jonathan because Jonathan bested him. And the fact that he, like, I like the fact that he wanted his body because he's like, no one else would do besides the man who bested me to be a part of me, and he wanted them to be one, and that was just...
Like, I really like that scene, and it's high up there for me, but I don't know why, but one of my favorite scenes in part 1 is literally when Speedwagon does the whole speech about the Joestars and just the whole thing, him up-talking the Joestars.
They're
like,
giants above men, the whole lot of them.
Like, legit, like, that scene just gave me chills, and I loved every second of this normal man, like, respected these people so much, and would give his entire life for them. Even going into part 2, like, he was such a big help to the Joestars because, you know, they lost a lot of their stuff and everything. They lost most of their family, and he spent every dime he had to help them to further research on so many different levels. Like, he kept like almost none of the money for himself. Like,
yeah, Speedwagon Foundation carries.
Like,
They
it's
just
crazy.
I was gonna say, we could talk about Speedwagon real quick. Like, I mean, the way he was introduced, like, you know, he was supposed to be like the gang leader kind of character. You know, he was master of the streets, I guess. You know, and the hat thing he did was really cool. I just wish he would have done it.
Shopu or whatever.
Yeah,
And I know you, Axl, especially think they could have expanded on that little.
I think they could have explained Speedwagon a little more in the first part, like, because he was just kind of introduced.
Well, there wasn't really
and
a lot.
There wasn't
to
like
him.
a backstory behind him. Like, we didn't know anything about him. And then he just
I think
joins Jonathan. I mean, don't get me wrong. I like Speedwagon, and you know, for 9 episodes, the story did a great job. That's a little.
I
bit
just
of
feel like
something
you
I would've
knew what you needed. Like, I don't think you needed a whole. He was a gang. He was a gang leader. Like, there's not much like else to his backstory. Like, you would learn like he was a gang leader probably from an early age. He learned his streets really well, and I just don't think that episode or 1 or 2 would have carried the series a lot. I just think it was like Speedwagon was a very important character, but I feel like what he got was needed.
Yeah, real quick. When Jonathan was burned up real bad before he met his wife.
Arena.
Arena. Yeah. Was he gay? Did he want to like fuck Jonathan?
I think he just wanted to like help him like recuperate.
Like,
I mean, okay, so the scene that always comes to me is whenever she's comforting him in the bed, washing him off and cooling his wounds, and she's got her fingers pruned. He was talking about how his company just won't do the same for her or for Jonathan as hers will, so he guesses he'll leave this one up to her. But there is definitely some disdain there. He wished that he was the one to console him. So I definitely think there's a bit of a bromance more so than any other two characters
think that's
in the
up
show.
to your opinion.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think Joseph's speculation of it in part 2 is warranted, definitely. But yeah, Speedwagon's a phenomenal character. I think it's funny how when people go to Ogre Street, their first reaction is just to gank them. But like at the very end of the fight with Jonathan, there's like 800 people on Ogre Street ready to just fight him, that Speedwagon said, "Stop! No one lay a finger on this man." And I'm just like, so how did all these people get on Ogre Street, not just get ganked? Like, where did that... So I guess I do agree with Aaron in the sense that I'd like a little more context but not so much on Speedwagon. I just want more context on Ogre Street. I want to know how one street, they just decide, not the rest of it. I mean, that one guy, the carriage driver who dropped Jonathan off was like, "That's Ogre Street, you can't go..." But it's like, the street you're on is safe from the 800 people who can... Like, they only do it on that street. There's like a code.
That is a lot more understandable than more episodes on Speedwagon. I could see people want more in-depth, like, explaining about, like Ogre Street as a whole, because I agree with you. Like, how do these 800 people join this gang? Like, oh, hey man, I like you.
Who decided?
I won't
Well,
gank
they
you.
could have had like a deal with the police, you know.
They could have, but they're like, you
we'll
get
keep
this
it on
street.
we'll
you
keep it on
get
Ogre Street.
this street.
Yeah.
The rest of the city you don't touch, but if you just murk people on here, it is A-okay. But then it's like, it's so notorious, everyone knew it, so it's like, who even goes there? Maybe that's the reason they wanted to get Jonathan, because they're like, oh, we haven't killed in like 15 months because no one comes here unless it's by accident.
I'm so blood hungry.
Wait, why didn't they get Dio?
That is fair.
Yeah, who knows?
Dio
knew about it.
Dio, I think, knew more about that stuff because he grew up.
He was one of the shady people.
He grew up in the slums. He literally had to rip people off to get money
this
to
boy
eat
never
stuff.
had to punch his way through the slums.
That's what I'm saying. Like, so Dio knew more about the streets and the thugs and all that. So, I mean, that's another big thing about Dio. He, like, grew up with all this stuff. And I feel like he grew up in a very bad part of town. So I feel like that's what a lot of his mindset is, why he is the way he is. That's off topic, but
still, that's, I mean, going back to Dio, that's like the positive about him. That's why I say I love that he's self-aware. Like, little subtle things. Like, if you ever notice the scene where he's younger and he's playing chess at the restaurant with the one gentleman,
that's what I'm
and
saying.
he beats him. Well, but I'm also saying, like, going like how he's self-aware. When the gentleman slams it, well, I'm not gonna say gentleman, he's not. Whenever the dude slams his face into his food, like, how you like the taste of that? You see Dio, a scene not everyone catches. He clenches his fork. He picks up his fork and just clenches it as if he's just about to stab this guy or like just fight him. But I think he realizes that he would get bested, or he realizes that it's not worth it, and he puts the fork down, and it's just a good scene to show how Dio is. And of course...
Oh, he is very smart, and he's very aware. Like, 100%.
Another thing, I feel like he didn't want to do it also to help his reputation. I don't think he likes other people to perceive him as like a lowly, you know,
he's
person.
He's very about seeming very like well off, a very up class person.
Because he acted so classy in front of that girl he was going to turn into a zombie.
Yeah.
Like, he acted so classy until the point that she showed no interest, and then he's like, "I'll just fucking."
He wanted to be a well off higher class person, but he just didn't grow up in that life.
Yeah, he wanted the life to, and that's why he tried to steal it. But at the same time, he never lost, like I said, that inside of, he knew exactly how Jonathan, I mean, the first time Jonathan beat him in the fight, and he talked about, hit him in the nose, and he comes back, twice as hard. And it's just, he was able to recognize when he was bested. He was able to recognize the dangers of Ogre Street. He was able to hold himself off from hitting that, or from stabbing that guy with the fork. And even Arena, whenever he slapped Arena, he grabbed the twig and he was like, "Calm yourself, you fool!" And then he broke the branch, threw it away.
He even talks about having to control his anger, and he doesn't want to wind up like his old man and this and that. So I mean, he understands he has these issues, and he tries his best in ways to control them, but he does have moments where he just like loses it.
Yeah. So I was just gonna say, even when he is drinking. Whenever whenever he thinks Jonathan died at Ogre Street, and he goes to test out the mask, and he's walking around drinking, he keeps talking about how he's sloshing around like a drunken fool, like, he's just like his father and everything. And it's just those moments I think about Dio, that he is so absurdly evil and just does so many things for his own selfish gain. And yet at the same time, he's fully aware of his actions. He knows the evil that he is. He understands what he does to people, and he understands the effect that it has on them, and the effect his actions have on other people.
Well, I was going to say, like, the whole mask thing, going to that street to discuss, try and test it. He really wasn't trying to go there to test it. I think he just took the mask to take it from him. Like, oh, let me take something your mom had, this and that. He wasn't really going there to intentionally test it.
No. Remember, he was, because he said,
he knew the spikes came out, so he was wanting to see if it would kill something.
That's right, because he said
That's
that,
fair.
he wanted to use it to kill Jonathan, because he said the wounds would be so unique that no one would be able to figure out what the cause was.
And so that's where I was wanting to talk about the mask, because when we were all first watching it, did any of you think, like, it was going to have vampires, and like did you think the stone mask?
No.
I thought it was just
vampires.
I thought it was just going to be more like a creepy aesthetic part to like emphasize like the type of show it's going to lead into. I did not think it was going to end up being vampires.
Yeah, even during the fight with young Dio and Jonathan, when the blood does get on the mask, and puts those spikes out. I just kind of glossed over it. The intro had the mask heavily involved in it, you know.
Oh, the intro.
And the mask, the mask was involved in the very first episode when Dario, you know, opens the briefcase and sees it and just devilish looking thing. And then, of course, the way it reacts. But even all of those three, I wouldn't just say that it just points to vampires. So that was an interesting twist. But I mean, I'm not gonna say I was disappointed.
Oh no, it was a pleasant surprise. Like.
Oh yeah, I think it carried, like, the whole vampire thing carried the show, like, leaps and bounds more. Like, I think that's what the show needed. Like, I think it needed some kind of hook like that.
It needed that supernatural aspect to really just punch it forward. And at the time in, like, manga and stuff, I don't think anyone was touching vampires. I don't think.
Yeah, not that I'm aware.
I think there was a few, but I don't think it was really, like, well known that this is a thing people are, like, doing.
Yeah, and it's also another thing you don't really see in, like, shonen manga either, you know.
That is
like,
true.
Back then especially, you know, there wasn't, like, that horror aspect. It was just, you know, the beat-em-up thing, and to have that...
It was trying to be more happy-go-lucky.
Yeah, to have vampires, some kind of, you know, more demonic-like presence or, you know, occult kind of thing. Like, it was just a very pleasant surprise.
It was.
How did you all feel about the mask being his mom's and not his dad's? Like, I guess the mom, was the adventurer and the stuff. I just know how you all felt about that.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting. I know that because that's one of the things Jonathan says is whenever he stabs his finger and puts the blood on the mask and it sends the spikes out whenever he's at his desk, he makes that comment and says, I don't know what it is about this mask, but it belonged to my mother, and so it brings comfort to me. So that's one of those other aspects, one of those kind of forgotten things where I kind of wish that it was touched a little more on, just to kind of get some history about it and his mom. But of course, at the same time, there's also a charm to having things like that be not explained and kind of having to just think about it.
Well, with her not being
yourself.
around, it almost like drove him more to, like, investigate it and trying to expand, like, on what this mask does, and it kind of evolved the show. Like, I felt like almost like if his dad was the adventurer and his mom had passed, like, I feel like there would have been, like, I think it would have had to play out a little bit more, but with her being gone, like, he was more curious to do these things that his mom did.
There was more mystery to the mask. It made us as viewers more interested in the mask too.
Yeah.
Like, when I first saw it, like, you know, shoot out the spikes and stuff, I was like, well, what the hell is this? You know.
I mean, I feel like when you first saw
what's this gonna do?
Like, I feel like when you first saw the mask, you were like, this is going to be a big thing, but what is it? Like,
exactly.
It draws you from the beginning of seeing it.
And it's also a very iconic thing, like, with JoJo to me, just because, like, no other vampire story says anything about a stone mask turning you into a vampire, and I think that's a very unique aspect and a nice spin on vampirism.
Yeah, no, I agree with that completely. I love any sort of spin that people put on vampirism. I love how different depictions of vampires in different, you know, series have different weaknesses. Some are weak to this, some are weak to that, some are weak to silver bullets, even though it's stereotypically a werewolf thing. Some are weak to the garlic, the stakes in the heart, and everything. Some are fine with the sun. Some are just allergic to, or not allergic, but cause death by fire, or some by only holy. It's just so different. And so for that spin on JoJo, just the way that it punctures the brain to specifically trigger, it's such a niche thing, and so I really like the way it does that. And then, of course, not just the way that the stone mask has an effect on the body.
I also really like the way Dio, like, the vampires suck blood through their fingers.
Oh yeah, that too.
And sometimes their hair.
Yeah, I mean, that's fine. I think that's great.
Well, it's really cool. It's a cool power that, like, I especially liked, like, and, you know, it's kind of off the whole eating blood through thing, but one of the biggest things I liked in Dio and Jonathan's fight was when Dio, like, takes and pulls out his vein, and, like, when them doing stuff like that.
That scene is great.
Like, it's so warm. Like, I can feel your blood coursing. It's so warm. Like,
yeah.
Yes.
I mean, they even blurred it out a little bit, like, in spots.
It's like, oh, I don't want to see this. But yeah, that's the cool thing, is the way vampirism affects the human body whenever it does certain things. But of course, you know,
those amount of senses you gather, like, to know where the right veins are at.
Well, see, and that's exactly why, you know, of course, Hammon, that's such a great, you know, yin to the yang, is because Hammon is another thing that just manifests in the body. It's another thing that you have control over whenever you use your breathing, and it's another element. So it's like you've got Dio, who was changed by the stone mask into a vampire because the mask puncturing the different parts of his head and then turning him into that undead being. And then you've got Jonathan, who met, Baron Zeppeli, and Zeppeli was like, I'm going to teach you how to use something that, was hidden inside.
He didn't say, I'm going to teach you. He punched him. Then he said, I'm going to teach you.
It's his arm. I'd be grateful.
I mean, that's fair. It's just a weird way to start Hamon.
Well, it's one of those things where, he was changing Jonathan's body to accept Hamon, sort of, or to adapt to it.
Punch in the wind.
I get it. I'm just saying it's a weird way to introduce a power.
Someone punch me and fix my knee.
Oh, and also, correct me if I'm wrong, but don't vampires feed off of Hamon also? And the fact that a Hamon attack just overloads them and that's what kills them? I thought that's how they explained it in the show.
I thought it was more or less
they live off of life energy, and Hamon is life energy, so when you pump them full of it, it overloads their system and kills them.
They did say that, but I think they also talked about how Hamon was kind of the same energy as the sun.
The sun, yeah, and I think that's a lot. I think it might be I guess you could say probably a little bit of both. You've got that it's an overcharge, but because it is, similar to the same energy as the sun, and the sun disintegrates them. But at the same time, you could argue that maybe that's the thing too. Maybe that the sun is something that also gives energy. It's got UV lights and stuff. So maybe that sort of energy that does overwhelm them, and that's what turns them to dust, because they can only take so much, and that's why the night's better. So
that goes back to the whole vampire thing being so much different from typical vampire
else.
Stuff, how they decrypt it and everything.
So what do we think of Hamon as a power?
Power source.
I think it has so many capabilities, and I think it even has more than what they touched on in the show.
Especially part 1. Part 2, they went into a lot more about what it could do, and we'll get into that.
I just think Hamon has such high potential and just so many different ways. And a lot of people say it's not good on humans, and I guess I see that, but I also see aspects to where they can use Hamon to I guess change.
They've also shown that it works on humans.
That's fair.
2, at least.
Yeah, that's fair. I'm just saying, I feel like they could have done a way where it would have affected humans and stuff as well.
Yeah, I mean, and like I said, I love the way because in part 2, when Cars whops him in the knee with the Hamon energy and melts him.
And also when Joseph fries that head.
Fries dude head, yep, at the airplane. So that's what I'm saying. So Hamon definitely has its versatility and stuff, and I kind of wish, as obviously a big fan of parts 1 and 2, that it would have carried on into the other series, but I can't say I'm disappointed.
We're going to talk about that in part 3.
Okay,
I have a lot of discussion.
He has opinions.
A lot of opinions on that.
It's already getting heated. Just wait till next week.
Calm the fuck down, Air. Anyway,
100%.
But yeah, I think Dio and Jonathan are phenomenal. I think their yin and yang is amazing. I like George. I think George has his own development where he was really hard on the boys, and then as time grew on, he became more aware.
I think he's an amazing character, as a whole. I think he's a good character.
I think that's a good depiction of what a father was probably like back then anyway.
Especially one who lost his wife. I mean, you gotta think he was going through shit. So he probably just wanted the absolute best for his kid and felt like if he didn't drive his kid to be some sort of perfect person, then he would steer away from
it. To be fair, you did see him be a lot less strict with him, and then Dio comes along, and then he's more strict with him. When he sees Dio's manners and everything.
He wants the best for his son.
No, I completely understand, but I'm saying you don't really see a lot of the harshness until Dio comes around.
And that's
if you take in someone who's acts more proper than your own son,
how does it look on you? I
want
understand
him to be
that.
just as respectable.
Exactly. It's where did he pick up all these manners?
No,
from?
but I think his dad was an amazing character.
He knew what kind of person
Dario was.
Yeah, Dario was. He knew, but he also owed him that debt. You know.
So he
he
didn't owe him anything. That was the big and that's one of the good things about George's character. That's how he is. You find that out later that he didn't owe him a darn thing. He gave him the ring, said sell it if it'll help you, and he still took in Dio. And so his kindness and charity was his downfall. That's what allowed Dio to come into the house and kill him. So no good deed goes unpunished, I guess.
Dio's relationship with his father was really good too. It just
helps. It also shows more of his
because Dio tries so hard not to be his father, but you still see those aspects within him because it's his father.
Exactly.
He's gonna, take.
I mean,
some...
even when he grows up and going forward, you still see these little things that nods to his dad and how his dad acted and everything.
How he won't swear on his dad's honor. How that's his, that's the one thing Jonathan says will catch in his throat. And then, but it's also interesting too because you see the respect and admiration he gains for Jonathan, and you feel like maybe there's a part of Dio that did truly at the end of it care about Jonathan in some way. That's why he wanted to mend with him. But then you also hear about how he just greatly downs his father because of the father driving his mother to an early grave and the way he treated her. So it makes you wonder that's another question of part one that I've always wanted to answer is what was Dio's relationship like with his mother? Did he love his mother? And when his mother died, is that what turned him into a bitter, rotten person who just was hell-bent on getting his own way?
I think he was evil from the get-go. I think he was just going to be...
Well, that's what Speedwagon says. Speedwagon's like, he was evil the day he was born, and the what's his name? The what is it? The potion guy, not the apothecary.
He's Wong or something like that.
Yeah,
it's the Chinese guy.
Yeah, Wang Yu or something.
Yeah,
but
Wang Yu.
He whenever he said that his birthmarks were a sign of the devil that brings him light, and it's just so it does make you wonder if he was predestined to be evil, but if that predestiny came to life when his mother passed away, or again if he just truly was awful throughout his whole life.
I think this topic would be very good for part 5.
Oh yeah,
there's a lot to talk about with
unpack.
that.
Yeah.
Oh no, 100%.
But we'll get to that for sure later because that's like more important spoilers because that's a more recent series.
We talked about Zeppeli a little bit, and then how did y'all feel about comparing like part 1's training to part 2's training, like what they went through and like how different it was?
Yeah, it was interesting because
because I feel like the training in part 2 was a lot. The training episodes was a lot better in part 2 because in part 1 you see him train with Hamon, you see the little explanations with Hamon,
and the thing with Jack the Ripper.
Yeah, the Jack the Ripper stuff, but. I just feel like it almost like the training was like come and gone because it's like as soon as they left for that town to fight Jack the Ripper and here's this wine, don't spill a drop, beat the vampire, and then after that it was like no more training, no more explanation, it was just done.
Training is always intense no matter which because part 1 it's like spill a drop and I literally won't help you anymore. So I mean the fact that he had to focus, you'll die to Jack the Ripper.
You will die.
Or in part 2 with the whole Hell Climb Pillar, it's just like it's always intense with Hamon. But I think the difference though is I think in part 2 they gave a timetable. They're like, okay, so give me 30 days and we'll fight. But they needed to get to Dio and get rid of him as fast as they could in part 1 because the more people he turned, the more enemies they
there was
had,
a lot
and
more
the more
stress
army
in part 1. And I understand that. I take that into account when I think about part 1's training. I just feel like it could have been a little bit more.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. It definitely could have been more. I think that time crunch was a big thing. And then just the sheer number of just obstacles they ran into really took away. They ran into Jack the Ripper, and then shortly after it is when they ran into Blueford and Tarukas.
Oh, that scene. I love that scene. I love that scene with him. The whole aspect of him using his hair to eat the blood was really well done. I just love his death scene was amazing.
And they also hinted that he had, when he was alive, even had that ability with his hair, which I think is neat.
I thought that was...
it's neat. It's neat, but you gotta...
It's weird.
You gotta think, so humans can do
that?
Jojo.
It's Jojo. That's all it is.
But that his death scene was amazing.
And I'm gonna bring him... Blueford.
Yeah.
I'm gonna bring him up in part 3.
Blueford as well. Yeah.
I don't like him.
These English names.
I don't like him because Blueford was the big one, right?
No. Tarukas was the. See, I love Blueford.
I didn't like Tarukas. Tarukas I didn't like because he didn't really have any character to him. He was just basically murder.
Yeah.
That's all he wanted.
I think that he had more hatred because the way they talked, it took more chops to cut his head off.
Yeah.
So maybe he lived a little bit longer and the hate just brewed more.
Yeah.
But he seemed more like a brutal type of person.
But they still could have gave him something.
He may have been a knight with honor, but I think he had more hatred. He was corrupted more.
And that's what it is because I think because that's the way the vampirism seems to be is when people get turned a vampire they just go off. They're bloodthirsty and blood hungry, and so it's almost like the vampirism manifests the worst parts of yourself and amplifies them. So it's like if Tarukas had more bitterness to him, then that would be more amplified. So even though that isn't truly who he was, that was the, vampiric version of himself. Whereas Blueford still had somewhat of that honor in him. It didn't get the best of him, the same way it would have. And then just Jonathan's fight with Blueford also was just wonderful. I loved his swimming down in the water, and that just goes back to the creativity. How he had to punch the fire to fight Dio, and he swam down in the water to lift up the rock just to get a hum on breath.
I would say that does play to Araki's good writing.
Yeah, the writing for that was just amazing.
And as far as creativity goes, when we get into part 2, creativity is fucking
like
turquoise blue overdrive.
So what did you think about Zeppeli's death?
Oh, so that's one of the things people the most underrated thing I think in all of JoJo is the most badass scene. The coolest scene, I think my favorite that gives me goosebumps when I see it, is the still ending that you see at the episode where Zeppeli knows he's about to die. He has his flashback to his reading from Tom Petty. And he knows that this is where it is, where he unchains, his the great stallion or whatever from the shackles, and he's bested, and that's where his death comes from. So he is staring death in the face, and as soon as the gate opens and he goes in there, he knows what's fixing to happen, and he's just
he knows
this is where it gets me. But he waltzes in there and he does that little thing where his little cape flares out and he sticks out his arm, and it just boom, the episode ends, and I'm
that to be continued is my that was the first one that I was like, whoa, I had to keep fucking
that was
going.
The best to be continued I think I've ever seen.
You're just
in
like
any JoJo.
Oh, it's so badass. Zeppeli is so hard. He is so hard.
He was ready to die. He knew what was happening.
Oh, and then when he towards the end in his death, when he called Jonathan his son.
Oh yeah.
That was great.
Yeah. It was, because that's the term with the Zeppeli.
He didn't get to have a family. He didn't get to have a family. He didn't get to do all these things that a normal life, because he had to leave the life of protecting the world, from the Stone Mask and stuff. And for him to do that in his death, I think really shows him as a character. I think he's an amazing character.
Yeah, Baron's great. Like I said, I
did find it weird that Speedwagon took the hats.
No, I think that makes sense, because over their journey, it kind of showed that those two had a very friendly relationship.
Yeah, they did.
He did fix his arm
and stuff. He did fix his arm and stuff to help them. And that's another thing to Speedwagon, how important of a character he was.
The heating abs. Oh!
Yeah, for fair, it did seem like that he was just heating the abs instead
I got heat right here!
Right here!
Instead of actually showing him putting the arm in him.
Speedwagon, best waifu of JoJo.
He is.
I just think they could have done more about I love that scene, but I think they could have shown him actually I guess cutting himself, or showing I'm actually trying to heat your arm by shoving it in my body. I think there could have
just jam it in there.
No, he just turns over, bends over,
stick it in me, right?
Stick it right in there.
Come here, Zeppeli. I've already lost my shot with Jonathan because of that darn arena.
Rod.
Help me. Yes, I think that. Another set. So we've touched on basically everyone in part 1 except the young,
the little kid.
No, well, I guess the kid. That's real relevant.
He climbed through a window to help.
Straight Zo and Dyer. Let's talk about Dyer and Straight Zo, because
Dyer could fly.
Dyer could fly. His little drop kick was my favorite thing, and then just the Thundercross split attack is the
no one's ever
dodged it.
That never goes well in JoJo.
And then he gets frozen.
He does, but
he gets that last little bit of just spite to Dio where he shoots the rose into his eye.
Yep. Well, but that's the other thing too. His fight with Jonathan. Jonathan, technically got out of it because he came up to Jonathan. Remember, Jonathan dodged the same way, and then Jonathan just headbutts him. He's like, no one goes in, everyone goes back, and he's just like, not me.
I'm a head forward type of guy.
I love Dyer. I love Dyer's little walk that he did that made the duplicate images of him where, Dio couldn't figure out. That was just so hard.
They really showed, that, even though that was just towards the end, that showed the possibilities of Hamon.
Yeah.
That
there's just so many, like I said, there's so many possibilities, and it's going back a little bit, but even when Zeppeli and Joestar did the whole thing with the leaves, it just shows, little things like that show the capability of Hamon.
Yeah. I also love that the master is Tom Petty.
Yeah, Tom Petty's cool. I love the musical reference. I mean, we could talk about the references in JoJo all day, but Dire Straits and Dio and Tom Petty and all. I mean, it's amazing. And
I did have a thing on Straight So. Like, so with Straight So in part 1, he was amazing. He was a good guy and everything. And then in part 2, he took the mask, and you almost sense like he got corrupted. Like, do you think that was the mask corrupting him, or do you think that was his vainness for wanting to be young
I've
again?
had a similar question. Like, as a human, did he take the mask and become a vampire just to show Joseph the threat of vampires in the film? Or was he just truly wanted that power and he wanted to be young? Because he says that at the very end that he just wanted to be young. He doesn't regret it. But I don't know. I feel like there was good, like.
Well, so this is my thing. So I think this is a great way to segue to part 2 for a minute, because I think my thing with Straight So, and one of the things that really was off-putting to me about part 2, I'm not gonna say it was bad, but it was just weird, was that Straight So, took the mask, he put it on, got changed, and he said, he wanted to be young, and he envied Dio and everything. And so whenever he hit Speedwagon, it makes you wonder if A, did he purposely leave Speedwagon alive just so Speedwagon could be recovered, or did he genuinely think Speedwagon is dead? That's one of the big questions. But my big thing is, after his fight with Jonathan, when he's bested, he does the same thing, or Joseph, I'm sorry, with Joseph, he does the same thing that von Stroheim does. And I'm just like, I don't know what kind of fortune tellers these people are going to, or if they just read tarot cards in their spare time. But as soon as Straight So's dying, he's like, Joseph, it's your destiny to discover this truth. You'll find that there's these 3 pillars, and they're going to awaken. You've got to stop. And it's just like, and then von Stroheim says the same thing whenever he blows up fighting Santana. He's just like, Joseph, it's your destiny. You have to fight and it's just
we'll get to von Stroheim.
Where's
soon.
everyone talking about this?
Yes,
where do they know this from? It just seems like everyone in the world knows Joseph's destiny but him, and that's my thing. Where I think that's a hard question to answer, because he definitely says at the end he doesn't regret it, and he felt that ecstasy and everything, and he's gonna go to hell with the sunshine and the Haman filled in his body. But at the same time, it's like he said he knew Joseph. So did he think he actually had a shot in hell of beating Joseph?
Straight So
he will
learn from Tom Petty. He's the new master of that place. He learned from Tom Petty, and Tom Petty knew how to read fortunes.
That's fair.
So Straight So could easily have learned that skill from Tom Petty.
Yeah.
Now Stroheim, I don't know. That don't make no sense. But
Stroheim.
It's because German science is the greatest in the world.
German science.
But yeah, so that's the thing. So it makes you wonder if Straight So was just kind of testing Joseph. That's really truly part of what it was. Maybe he wanted to be young again, yeah, but maybe it was just a test to him. And then Joseph has the biggest ass pull in the entire show, even more so than when he beat Cars and literally pulled a Tommy gun out of his ass. Are you
talking about my favorite scene in all of JoJo?
Literally an ass pull. I mean, that had to be where it was hiding.
Where the fuck did he get that Tommy gun?
Where did he get the grenades?
And the grenades.
Yeah. He had so many grenades.
At least the grenade.
I knew this man was crazy, but I didn't know he was that crazy.
No, he's
shooting somebody in broad daylight and with a Tommy gun, no less.
This isn't a person. Look at him. Look at his legs. Mine are much healthier than his are.
Oh, that is another favorite.
Smokey.
That is another one of my favorite aspects of Joestar, like the running away.
What I do best.
Run away!
Joseph is definitely the luckiest JoJo by a mile. I mean, not only does he not die,
all the time does he bring up how lucky he is. He does it all the time. He brings up luck.
And whenever he does the next you'll say thing, that's luck. Like, that's probability. Yeah. Like, he's playing off probabilities and luck and things like that.
Yeah. So he's very much in, and I think that's one of the things about him as a character. And, another thing I hear people all the time, people talk about Joseph and his strategy and how big of a strategist he is. And, it's one of my hot takes that I just don't know that I think Joseph is very smart. Only because
I disagree with that.
See,
but
the reason I don't think he is because I was sitting there and I was thinking about all these aspects. I'm like, first of all, he is so lucky. But he has strategy. Don't get me wrong. He comes up with stuff. But there are so many things that are completely done by chance. And his victories mostly come from luck. But another thing I realized is I was like, when you look at all the Joestars, he's the only one really who didn't do anything prominent with just his own mind. I mean, other than his fighting, but I'm like, Jonathan went and became he had top marks in archaeology, and then Jotaro became this marine biologist. Joseph did real estate. Joseph was a realtor.
So?
But I'm just saying.
He's Indiana Jones.
He didn't do anything that was just prolific.
He saved the world and he defeated the strongest opponent in Jojo.
I will say,
probably
him being smart and a strategist and everything, like that more is believable because of the. Because he even brings it up multiple times how he reads all these history books. He learned about all these different strategists and all these different.
Yeah, he read the Art of War and so that's what I'm saying.
So
he
I'm saying,
retained
like,
some stuff, but it's just weird. It's like, so the reason a lot where this stems from is there's a theory, and apparently it's not like it's based on evidence, that that Joseph has always had Hermit Purple. There's this, I was reading this thing that was talking about how Iraqi, I believe it was Iraqi, said something along the lines of, if a Hammon user went and saw Joseph back in part 2 as young as he was, they would see Hermit Purple wrapped around him.
You mean his
and that, his stand Hermit Purple. And that's what they would see. And that Hermit Purple is shown to be able to reveal things, like how it reveals location and everything, and it reveals all those insights. And people believe that, Hammon itself as well, like how Tom Petty used it, was a way to be able to see in the future. And so they think that with Joseph's ability to have Hammon plus his dormant, Hermit Purple, that Joseph somewhat had a peek into the future, and a lot of that is what allowed him to predict what people were going to say. And that's a lot of what allowed him to think 3 steps ahead of everyone.
If that's the case, that's great. Like, I think that's.
So you're saying he's not necessarily smart. It's just he had the
ability, the natural ability.
He had the foresight to see things.
One thing that Joseph states is that, I think he's quoting, one of those strategists or whatever, is he said luck plays a part in the strategy. So I think what he was trying to say is whenever he does plan out things and strategize, he accounts for his good luck also.
I mean, the whole ring thing, I guess, could play to that too. How in the fight with who was it? Which Pillar Man did he fight again? Wamoon. Like he put the ring on and he did that, and then like I said, he went. It was sneaky, but I mean, he did the whole rock thing underneath the rocks and stuff. So I mean, I feel like he did understand that luck was a big aspect of what he did. So I feel like he strategized for luck best he could with little things like the ring, scarves, hats. I feel like a lot of his strategy was, this could be.
Yeah, he made his own luck for sure. He did things that allowed those lucky moments to be able to happen, but at the same time, just the sheer number of times the luck favored him, and that's why I say that theory. That again, I think there's some evidence based on it, but. It's just that, Joseph had a little more insight than other people, and that gave him perspective. Now, that is countered a little bit by the end of the series whenever Cars goes into space, and he's like, of course, I planned that from the beginning. He's like, no, I actually just got lucky, but it's going to eat Cars away. So he admits that he had no idea that was going to happen. So, like I said, maybe...
I was going to say, did you think that he thought about luck with the volcano, or do you think he generally thought that the lava would kill him?
He definitely thought the lava would kill him. After that...
He
had no, intention on luck being a play and a part in that?
No. Everything else was him just saying what Cars wanted him to say, so that Cars would, leave out in outer space thinking that he's been bested.
Yeah. He wanted Cars to think that he was
Cars had a 400 IQ.
Strowman died for no reason. I mean, that's
Wait, what?
Not no reason. I'm saying, I'm going into Stromheim stuff, which is...
Where he died in the war.
Yeah, he died in the war.
I didn't like that.
I don't think a war would kill Stromheim.
Yeah, that's
if
fair.
the Pillar Man couldn't, nothing can.
It is odd, but I mean, I don't know.
Because his whole body, because they even said his skin, at one point they said his skin was cold. So he was just a robot.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, who knows? Maybe
he was an amazing character.
German science got bested. Maybe that's alluding to, how, Germany didn't, Nazi Germany didn't take over. So maybe it's alluding to that other, places weaponry got advanced as well.
Yeah, that's fair.
So that could be part of it.
I was going to say another reason is that he could have just, found a way to write the character off because he didn't want to keep writing for a character that basically is, going to live out everybody.
Speedwagon died a bachelor.
He sure did.
Single, no heart attack.
But,
no kids.
Man, he made all that money.
All that money. And gave it all away.
And he used it for the best purposes. Medicine, occult stuff,
science. And that was the funniest part whenever at the very beginning. It's just everyone, can tell that upright bearing and that, scar. And it's they introduce, and then Straits is oh, Speedwagon, nice to see you again. And then they talk about the Speedwagon Foundation. It's just archaeology, science, medicine, and engineering. But there's also another part of the Speedwagon Foundation, the occult section. Which fucking deals with demons and vampires.
That's fair.
The dark arts. It's like Speedwagon Foundation's. I love how that's another, like, again, Speedwagon's just great with having 800 people who just do things. As he had it on Ogre Street, and then he has it with the Speedwagon Foundation, where they just don't let people, like, regular humans just seem so oblivious to all the things that the Joestar family deals with. And it's just like Speedwagon's got a whole crew, of humans, just normal people who are aware of all this. They're like, yeah, we know vampires and demons and all this shit exists.
He's got media people blocking all that stuff out.
That's true. It's so prolific.
It's weird.
The Speedwagon Foundation is important all the way up to part 5, technically, sort of.
Yeah.
We can't talk about part 5 today.
Oh, spoilers.
But what's weird is German science was apparently the best, but all of Speedwagon's money, he still wasn't better than German science.
Speedwagon stuff. You
didn't see Speedwagon bring somebody back to life. Like Stromheim was like basically a robot.
I mean, he had to have some living parts to him.
Well, I mean, he definitely. But I'm saying you didn't see Speedwagon like turn anybody into a robot.
The Speedwagon Foundation brought Joseph back to life. That's in part 3. We're not going to talk about it.
That's fair.
But they did.
Oh yeah.
It was Jotaro's idea, but I mean, they
that's my second favorite reference in Jojo. But
weird.
Yeah.
Anyway. But yeah, so that's the thing about part 2 and part 3. Both, again, they have their dark, gritty, feels to them. Part 1 I just love because, again, I love the dichotomy between Joseph not Joseph, keep mixing up, of Jonathan and Dio. I love their yin and yang. I love just the atmosphere of it. I love the Haman. I love the first 3 episodes. I like the characters that are in it, and I love the fact that, it's 9 episodes, it's short, sweet, and it's so impactful. And then part 2, you get a little bit longer. It's still not nearly as long as the other parts, but it's still got a little bit more length to it. You've got Joseph, who's this nice young buck character who, has got an attitude, who... a lot of people,
because he like you.
A lot of people like him. See, that's the thing. When I changed my name to Joestar, my middle name was already Joseph. I don't want people getting that twisted, thinking that I chose Joseph. No, Jonathan is my favorite. If I had a choice, it'd be Brandon Jonathan Joestar. But I didn't want to change my middle name. I didn't want to change. Me and my fiance basically decided when we got married, which is coming up October 12th of 2020. So exciting. That we wanted to have our own last name. She didn't adopt mine. I didn't adopt hers. We're like, let's just start our own. We'll be the top of the family tree. So we went with Joestar because, I mean, it clearly only made sense. It's the only good last name to pick. But yeah, so part 2, like I said, you've got Joseph, who's the character that he is. You've got Speedwagon, who's still prevalent in the series. Von Stroheim is an amazing character. You've got the Pillar Man.
He just keeps coming back.
He does. Who are their own, different breed of villain. You've got, you still see notes of Lady Arena. You see
Caesar.
Smokey.
You get to see the descendant of Zeppeli.
Oh, yeah, that was
I love Caesar.
Yeah.
Caesar is a really good character. Like, I think that, even that little bit of training with Caesar and stuff, was so much, better than...
The relationship between Caesar and Joseph, doing it too, is also just really, really good. Towards the end, you get to the feeling that they're, brothers.
I mean, I'll say...
It's the same thing with Zeppeli. You feel like Zeppelis just have this natural family tie.
They do.
I didn't necessarily love the whole introduction with him, but I will say it's it's a really good
pasta and how he's charming that.
It's a great introduction for a character.
I didn't like that he was down talking Joseph.
To be fair, Caesar
about
couldn't
his
even
whole
beat a
heritage,
pigeon.
Not knowing something, and automatically hating the Joestar family because of Zeppeli's death. But that way, he almost, he didn't know.
To be
what
fair,
happened.
Caesar was also an ally of Nazi Germany. And he makes that abundantly clear when the German soldier picks him up. And he's just like, Italy and Germany have an ally, or have allegiance, blah, blah. And it's just like, I mean, they're not even subtle about that. No. I mean, again, the Nazis end up helping, for the greater good. And then you've got Italy, who is, allies with Germany, and Caesar's just not shy about it. I don't know where Caesar's mind was. I don't know what kind of... I mean, he was trying to charm that woman with some Haman and, all of his, little antics, and then he's hanging out with Nazis. I don't know where Caesar was as a person.
He's still a good character.
Another instance of Haman affecting people.
There you go. But yeah, definitely. They had their bickering at first, and then they ended up getting close, which is, a great development that they had just between their relationship. And, of course, Caesar's death is just... hits you,
Oh yeah. Oh, it is such a good scene too. It is so good.
Hold on! Step back to part 1 real quick. All right, Caesar's death is sad. I'm not taking that away from Caesar. But some people overlook it, and it makes me sad going back to part 1. George's death hurts me the most.
Oh, it's
all the characters. Literally, he is dying after blocking the knife from Dio from Jonathan. And a lot of people, I don't think people remember this or like pay attention to it. But as he's dying, he says to Jonathan, he says, "Don't cry. We're better to die than in the arms of my son." And he dies. And I'm just like, damn, that just ripped my soul out. So as sad as there are deaths in so many other parts of the series, it's just the fact that that one hits so different. And I know Caesar is like the one, and of course you got the Caesar memes and you've got everything that goes with it, but nothing hits quite as hard to me as George's death. But back to part 2. Caesar's death is definitely a sad one. It's another...
Oh, I just love
the scene where he pops up behind Wamu.
Yes, I love that.
That is perfect.
Yes.
Oh,
The only problem I had with it is it was so badass. You've got the shadow in his hands. Like, literally, that could be a background in your computer. It's so badass because he just... but then it's just so sad because he just...
No, I wish it would have been the pop-up behind and then just grab the ring and fall back. Like,
yeah.
So
I
much
agree
better.
because it would have been like your last energy to grab. But just the little punches, it was just kind of like...
Well, I
that made it seem more like, he's going to die. So,
I think
it makes sense. It makes him look, more pathetic, or weak. You can tell he's drained.
Well, I take it as he was literally trying to do everything so Jonathan,
he was desperate.
He did not want to have him have to fight him. Yeah, I didn't like
now.
everything in his
little
abilities.
problem is Joseph and Lisa could have ran in, as far as the anime is concerned anyway, they could have ran in there at a couple points and he would have lived.
Yeah, there's a bunch of things
because they were literally sitting outside of the hole. Caesar.
I like how also with AC/DC's fight, and I understand, but you've got Caesar who's doing his exam, and Joseph was doing his whenever AC/DC interrupted. Now they're fighting. And it's just like, Caesar, we'll never make it to them in time. Let's just go prep for if he kills Joseph.
No, here's the binoculars.
Okay. Yeah, the little binoculars.
Watch and see if he dies.
Honestly, I think I would have wished that Caesar would have got to fight AC/DC.
Yeah, I would have liked that too.
That way Jonathan wasn't Joseph wasn't the one that beat literally everyone.
All of the people. Yeah, I agree. Caesar, it would have been nice to have that.
But AC/DC's whole thing, he's the super strategist. That was supposed to be his thing.
Oh, so he tries to show
that Joseph's a better strategist than even a pillar man who's lived for. How long did they say they've lived before? Like 12,000 years or something like that.
It's a long time. I forget too, but it was definitely thousands and thousands.
They literally referenced Rome, so
they reference a lot of things. But it was definitely a long time. So that's what I'm saying. That AC/DC's part was good, and AC/DC's little thing where. He was definitely the most underwhelming of them because his fight was so quick and, not prolific. But his little thing where he attached his, nervous system to Suzy Q and took it over. And even after Joseph beat him, he had that little thing where he's like, I respect the way he chose to live. He fought until the bitter end, even when he was just a brainstem, essentially. And so that was kind of neat as far as him as a character.
That's one thing I really like about Joseph as the series goes on. You can tell he takes something from everyone he loses / wins against. He takes from Caesar. He takes from AC/DC. He takes from Wamu. He incorporates all that into his own personality through the end. So he actually develops quite a bit.
Oh, I think he develops the most.
That's part of the reason he's my favorite Joestar.
He's very Joestar as well.
The Tommy gun. The Tommy gun is a lot of it. I'm not gonna lie.
Wins him over.
I don't know how
that was the most amazing scene to me. I was just like, oh, just pulls a Tommy gun out of his ass. All right.
By the way, if we're full of hot takes today, you want the hottest take? I think it's more controversial or hot of a take than anything we've said here on the podcast today. Is my fiance's favorite villain is AC/DC, and I don't.
Wait, of the whole series?
Yeah. No, I love her to pieces. Absolutely love her, and I'll never She just likes him. I don't know what it is.
She will never be on this podcast.
No. But she loves him. She loves her some AC/DC, and I'm just like, of all the Pillar Men, he's just one that I just don't hear a lot of love for.
Love the reference, but not the character.
It's not the character. I don't know if she just loves the fire aspect, the Burning King, or what, but she absolutely just...
It's because he's read The Art of War.
Yeah, there you go. That's why.
She likes talking about the Pillar Men. How come they all had special elemental powers except the one
Santana?
Yeah, he was
he had nothing extra.
I guess he was the low man on top.
He was the only one. Well, the thing was, he was the only one though who really utilized his whole look, I can fold myself. Like,
go
I get
through
everyone,
people.
everyone did that. Like, Wamu did it a couple times. But, I mean, he literally was just his whole digestive system thing. He utilized that more. He was throwing his little stomachs onto, like, Joseph's leg to help, or on a Stroheim's leg to help disintegrate it and stuff and start eating away at it. And then he just walked through some of the people and just nommed them. And then he climbed into Stroheim's stump and just all of those different things that he did that you really didn't see. So he did have some unique aspects
and
about
he's
him.
still alive.
Yeah, that's fair. He's
still
petrified. Yeah, he's.
I will say,
Which is weird because, the sun and everything killed all the
it
other
normally
Pillar
just
Men.
disintegrates, but he's petrified.
Well, I think like he's definitely like the least smart one of them all. But I feel like a lot of his like the whole folding and the whole that I think it comes from his lack of less intelligence than the other ones, because I think he just does what he needs to. Like he's more survive.
Yeah, because he didn't just break out like Wamu did and just be like, awaken my masters and just know everything. He woke out and it's almost like he had to develop.
more.
He had to learn some.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, so I feel like all the things he did was because it was instinct to survive.
Maybe he turned to stone before the other three. That's why he's in a separate place.
That could also be a thing. Yeah.
Like maybe he tried to run away from. This is all speculation. But that might be the reason. That might be the reason he doesn't understand English or language.
I feel like speculation's a lot with the Pillar Men. Like we don't get
because we don't know where the horns came from.
Yeah, like what's with the horns, man?
We get like the little backstory of what Cars discovered, his whole thing with the stone mass, and then like whenever they killed everyone. That was about the furthest you got. But I mean, it's definitely interesting. The Pillar Men is definitely a really interesting thing, and I think that's one of the cooler. Well, actually, you say elements too, but I mean technically, I don't know that Cars really had a. Did he have an element? Well, yeah, but it was like
he refracted.
Yeah, his little bone blades and stuff like that. But but still, it was weird.
You're saying calcium's not an element?
I mean, I guess it is, but that's it.
Jesus.
So I reckon
one thing I really liked, and they did it some in part 1, and they did it a lot in part 2. I loved when they brought up the little specs and stuff about like abilities and stuff. How like when Straitzer broke a rock, they were
how
like
strong he was using
the centimeters.
Yeah.
I love.
And they made sure it was 5 times stronger.
432 pounds of pressure. Blah blah blah.
And it was 5 times stronger than what Santana could do.
And they just did it with so many. Like they did it with everything. Like they did it with almost everything, and I loved that aspect of what they did with that. Like especially like when the Cars got his ultimate form. They broke him down into different little things. They even gave his IQ. They did everything. Smartest Pillar Man. Smartest person in the world.
He just got Joseph eating his spaghetti. It's like table salt. It's like 0 calories.
If you watch the dub, the voice actor for that mob boss dude that Joseph punches is the same voice actor for Joseph when he gets old.
Oh, really?
The big fat one that he beats up, with the metal. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that big one. Yeah, you're right. He really is.
That's a neat little bit.
I didn't know
this is weird, because I did watch the dub for part 3 for a little bit. At the end of part 2, when Joseph is old and he has that voice, he still has his British accent, but in part 3, he loses it.
He does. He's racist.
Again.
He'll never forgive the Japanese.
He will never forgive the Japanese.
Again.
They do make some nifty gadgets, though.
He says that at the end of part 2.
That's fair.
While he's listening to the Beatles on a Walkman.
That's fair. So let's compare endings. Compare ending 1 to ending 2.
I honestly thought Joseph was going to die in part 2. First watch. I thought that was going to be the trend.
I did too.
Since he was there at that training place for a month, I thought Susie Q was just going to end up pregnant with his kid and he was going to die.
100%. That's where I thought it was going to.
Love Susie.
But I mean, if I compared the two endings, I'd still think the ending 1 is a lot better than ending 2.
I do love the ending of part 1, but like I said, that's just. But that's also a bias because, part 1's my favorite. I do like part 2 as well. And, I like I love the joke of it. I like that part 2 doesn't take itself as serious. So that's the best part about JoJo. You get a little bit of everything. You get different genres for the different parts. You get different personalities from the different JoJos. Everything is so different. So regardless of how you feel about part 1 or part 2 you can always, most people are going to have a part where they enjoy, whether it's the way that they have to do their fights, whether it's the setting, whether it's how epic or how minor the adventure is, whether it's the character. You have such a different cast and crew for every different part in such different genres and settings and scenery, and it's just all of those things about JoJo. And it's got humor, it's got, you know, serious moments, it's got great action. There are so many aspects of it that make it just a phenomenal above everything else anime, at least for me. And that's like part 2. You know, part 2's ending had the humor where Joseph wasn't actually dead, and he did all his crinky fingers and everything.
Send the letter, the telegram.
Yeah. I think the only thing I like about part 2, as far as the ending goes, like what I really like about it, is I love the explanation they give for all. I love how they touch on what Stroheim did afterwards, with how he championed the German science and he died at the battle, and then you've got, you know, Speedwagon, how he was a lifelong bachelor and died in his home, and Arena, who died at her bedside and stuff, and
surrounded by her family,
surrounded by her family, very happy. It touched the heartstrings. But that's what I'm saying. So part 2 had more closure. But part 1, the fight with, you know, Jonathan and Dio Brando. And Dio Brando is just, I love him as a villain too. Of course, part 3 Dio is good as well. But that's the things I love about part 1 Dio, is not only his self-awareness.
He fought as a head.
Yeah, not only his self-awareness and the things he overcomes and like what he goes through, his tenacity, his charisma, but it's just the fact that he is more, you know, he's learning as he goes. He had to, you know, he had to make the choices he did when he didn't stab the guy with the fork. He had to sit there and control his anger, and he, you know, had his plan for what he was going to do to get back at Jonathan and take over the family fortune. He had his plan. When that plan failed, he moved to something else. Every time those things happened. But in part 3, he was just the presence. He was just like, oh, I know I'm better and stronger than everyone, so I really don't. I'll just send my henchmen to do it. And that's why I like part 1 Dio so much. Once you get to Dio in part 3, it really comes together and it's great. But prior to getting to him, he just feels like a presence more than an actual villain. And in part 1, the villainy that he had is phenomenal.
I'm saying we need to, that you know, that's part 3 discussion. You know,
it is.
Well, I was gonna say, like, I think
part 2 is my favorite part, and one of the things that I think that like sets it up better than part 1 is I really like the cast, like the main cast, a little bit better in part 2 than part 1, except for the villains. Like, the Pillarmen fucking can't beat Dio.
Oh, I mean,
who the Pillarmen, like, I liked the Pillarmen. I mean, AC/DC was in. But
I mean, who in JoJo beats Dio?
Wamu was great. I liked Wamu a lot. And then Cars is another one who's just kind of Like,
I think he was just trying to be. I think he was trying to be.
I understand why people. I think a lot of people don't like him because Wamu reflects this. Like, he's a villain, but he's still noble. He has his warrior's code and everything. And I think the love for Wamu is what takes away from people for appreciating Cars, because when you love Wamu for the honor and the code and everything he stood up for, it's hard to overlook, like when Cars just blatantly lied. And,
I was going to say, I love
it. Also seems that Cars, once he became perfect like that, he would have just killed AC/DC and Wamu and not allowed them to become.
Oh, I mean, 100%.
Like, that's the kind of, like, he feels like he wanted to be the only one that was perfect.
He is just,
I disagree.
He kind of just shit talked on his friends after he became, like, after they died. Like, he just kind of shit on them.
Well, it's just because he's chaotic evil, and I think that's the thing that goes underappreciated with him a lot, is he is just pure. Because, like, the funny thing too is, like, Joseph lies all the time. Joseph will sit there and lie and connive, but then Joseph just points the finger at Cars and is like, "You deceived us. You said that you were gonna fight her and no trickery and stuff." And it's just like, you have been doing that this whole series. Shut the up. Like, I don't.
Because he's
I'm
good
a
at
villain,
heart.
But it's just, that's why I'm saying that Cars is just pure evil. You know, he is the chaotic evil, and I think that's the thing that has a charm to him. I think that's why some people can appreciate Cars. But if you liked the more lawful evil that Wamu was with his code and his morals and everything, it's hard to like both him and Cars. Then I don't know what AC/DC was. He was.
I think you have to pick at that point.
Also had that great scene where he like, even though he's just ahead, just like Dio, you know, he defends Joseph. He's like, everybody gets the fuck away.
But that's the other thing too, is it's funny because he took Joseph by surprise. Joseph was just like, huh? Whenever he just used his drill and killed all those people, he's like, "Don't dishonor him, you fools!" And then he dies, like, right after, and it's like that last burst of energy he used to save Joseph from the disrespect of the zombies. Couldn't he have technically tried to use that to kill Joseph to win the fight?
I truly believed it wouldn't work. Like, I think he knows it would have been a wasted effort. He already knew he was beaten, and he accepted that fact.
And that's fair.
I think that's part of his warrior spirit. He knew he was beaten, and he's not really the kind of person, I don't think, that would use a cheap trick like that. He's already defeated down to a head. Why would he,
Oh, I don't think he would ever do something like that.
That scene where Joseph gives him his blood so that he doesn't feel as bad when he dies.
Oh, that's an amazing scene.
Did you have to let Caesar, his blood bubble go? I wanted to honor him as a great warrior. Yeah. Next you're going to say, Joseph, you don't mean. Joseph, you don't mean.
No, that's great. That was so good.
Yep. I think as a whole, that was an amazing scene as well.
Since it seems like we're about to wrap up on part 2, the prequel, the after credit scene where you just see Dio's coffin being lifted back up.
Oh yeah.
That is perfect.
It is just so. Oh my god, this again. And so for a first time viewer and someone who doesn't really know what's to come with the series, it's so great because just the seeing that part 1 is the character from it is going to have some sort of a comeback. No, you don't know what effect he's going to have until you actually get to part 3, but just the alluding to it, I think, just drives the anticipation. It really gets people going to get excited for the next part. So part 1, I think, does a great job of introducing kind of a vibe for JoJo in the way that it gets. Part 2 kind of solidifies it because it has more of the humor and the kind of wacky nonsense and the assholes that you see. The poses.
I love the poses is my favorite part about JoJo. It's the most iconic.
We gotta
part,
talk about the music of the whole thing.
The
Pillarman music is great.
But part 1's music, I think, is the best.
Intro song is perfect.
And the ending themes. You've got regular, just normal songs that, you've probably, Roundabout by Yes. That's just a song if you're into classic rock, you've probably already heard. And, you've already heard a lot of the ending songs that you have to the other parts. But I love the ones that they use because not only do the ones seem like they fit, except maybe Freaking You in part 5, but I am not disappointed at all that is the ending thing.
We'll talk about that later.
But as far as outros and intros go, JoJo just doesn't miss. It really doesn't.
No, all of them are fucking
they're all
9
really,
something out of 10s. And I'm not gonna lie, the first intro, 10 out of 10. It's it is the best one.
10 out of 10 for me.
It is the best.
100%.
It's not my favorite, but it is. Again, I think all parts of JoJo are 9.5 out of 10 or better, and all intros are 9.5 out of 10 or better. Except, I'm not gonna do the Chase discussion today. We'll talk about Chase. I have reasons that I love Chase as an intro and that I hate it. Part 4 is intro. The second one, it's controversial.
Another thing
we'll talk
I like
about that later.
Another thing I like about part 1's intro is how you see the manga strips in the background.
I like that a lot too.
I just think as a whole, part 1's
And it shows all of the.
Yeah, it shows.
It does. It shows.
Except for maybe 8, maybe not 8.
No, it shows. I don't think it shows 7 either. I think it does.
It does.
Yeah, I thought it did.
Yes,
oh,
it
okay.
does. Because you see his daughter and stuff.
No, it's 6.
Yeah, it's 6. That's what I'm saying. I think it ends at 6.
I thought it showed 7, but I could be wrong.
We could both be wrong.
No, it shows 6. It for sure shows 6.
Yeah. Maybe it only shows 6 because maybe even if part 7 was out whenever the introduction came, then even if part 7 was out when part 1 was animated, I think the reason maybe they only showed up to Jolene, if they did, because they might have showed Johnny, but I think they only showed up to Jolene maybe just because of
it's the main universe.
Yeah.
I will say I love that name.
Jolene.
Yeah, Jolene. I love that name.
Can't wait for the anime.
I can't wait for part 7 to be animated.
Yes, but I'm also excited for part 6.
Yes, part 6. Yeah, definitely. I'm excited for every part.
When do you know? Is there any confirmation?
No, I thought they said something. I thought David Production said something about 2021. I thought it's supposed to come. I don't know that that's confirmed. Don't take my word on that. Look it up because I think that's what it said, but. Yeah, part 6 is going to be a wild ride. I'm excited for it. Excited for every part of JoJo and the future that JoJo has. An amazing series with amazing characters, amazing variety, great genre, great humor. Whether you like the sub or the dub, whether your favorite part is part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4, 5, and whether your favorite JoJo is different than your best friends, there's something to love in every single part of JoJo. And I think that's the reason it's so prolific, why we enjoy it so much. Why I changed my name, and I think that's the reason we wanted to start the podcast out with such an iconic and impactful anime for all 3 of us.
That's just, and you saying all that, it's just weird for me to think that a lot of people just are disliking 1 and 2 because I mean it just starts everything, and that's like your opinion. Like there's something to like out of all of JoJo.
It's just like your opinion, man.
Well, I've even heard people say to skip 1 and go straight to 2.
Please don't be a part skipper.
Like
if you
do not be a part of that. Do not.
If you're watching or if you're listening to this podcast, and I don't know why you would if you know nothing about JoJo, but if you're just an anime fan or if you've been on the fence about JoJo and you're listening in to try to get into it, that's great. I'm sorry for any spoilers that happen because there's gonna be a lot of them anytime we discuss anime. That's why it's discussed. But regardless of the spoilers, if you've been on the fence about it, and maybe you don't care about the spoilers because you're like, oh, I don't plan on watching it. I'm telling you, just watch it. Like, we can do it. You can get through it. You just got to give it a chance because I know that that's easier said than done, and some people tap out on part 1, but I promise you, even if you love part, 4 is when you actually start liking it, you will usually end up appreciating 1 and 2. My fiance, when I suggested Joestar, she was because she liked part 1 and 2, but once she watched part 3, she was like, okay, I want this. I definitely want this. Even though Jotaro's last name is Kujo, she decided that, yes, this anime is something special, and that's just kind of the way people are, it seems. But, is there anything else? Any closing thoughts? Anyone? First episode of the podcast.
Yeah, I think that's it. So we'll see you all in the next one.
All right, A2B1 Podcast signing out. Thank y'all for tuning in, and we'll catch y'all next time when we discuss JoJo Part 3.